real event in your life, had it happened in a book or movie, would be obvious foreshadowing. Story 1. Seeing a wanted poster at my college library featuring 3 ridiculously cartoonish police composites. I then looked up an article to see what these people were wanted for. They had robbed someone in the dorms at my school. That's interesting. I was cracking up at how shitty the suspects looked on the poster. It was very odd. 3 weeks later, my house is being raided by the police and it turns out 2 of my roommates were on that wanted poster along with another one of their friends. It was wild. I lived with 2 of these guys and the police composites of them were so terrible that I couldn't recognize them. Edit: no, I was not the third guy. I'm a white woman and the suspects were 2 black men and 1 white man. We lived off campus so I didn't get my own dorm room after this. I think the police eventually figured out who the suspects were because one of them had been on the football team and there was some security footage, or maybe it was tracking of the stolen laptop. Story 2. Quite a few guests at my wedding asked about why my sibling looked so bad, joking about how he looked like he was knocking on death's door. He OD'd the next day during my honeymoon. Story 3. I'm not sure if this counts, but my mother was driving through a blizzard with me in the passenger seat, and I said, "Hey, you're going a little fast, you should probably slow down." She responded, "I know how to drive. I've been doing it for 30 years. Not a minute later we spun out right into the ditch. Edit: I woke up to an exploded inbox. RIP. To address some of your questions and comments. 1. Yes, she would have still spun out had I not said anything, brakes or not. We were at a bend in the road and couldn't have possibly made it around at that speed. 2. She was quiet, embarrassed, and apologetic as we sat in the ditch waiting for help to arrive. I did not let her live it down for the remainder of the season. Story 4. My dad and I were just about to leave for my soccer game when I decided to rip a massive. I shat my pants. My dad starts laughing like a madman, tears and stuff, then proceeds to yell, "This is how you rip one." He shat his pants. Story 5. When began pooping blood, all my coworkers in the bar were close as, so I confided. As expected they all joked along the lines of, "Oh, you might have but cancer," or something similar. Jokes on them. It was cancer, gastrointestinal leiomyosarcoma. Been clear since October 2010. PSA edit for those worried. If you be pooping to bloods. Bright red blood is indicative of being further along the gastrointestinal tract, large bowel or later, possibly, but not exclusively, and fissure rupture hemorrhoid or something of that nature. May not be anything too serious, but may need attention if it's ongoing. Consult your doctor. Dark brown red and tar-like is indicative of being at the upper end of UGI tract. Could be indicative of problems in the stomach or small bowel. You could be looking at a serious diagnosis: IBD, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, etc., or like me, some form of cancer. Consult your doctor. Loss of blood for any reasons is a serious matter and should be SE'd, and if needed, addressed. PSA edit 2. I'm just a random dude on the internet who had cancer that one time. Happy to give advice I've learned from my experience, or listen to your problems if you want to vent. However, if you're having problems, go see your doctor. Don't take a random dude from the internet's advice as gospel. Consult a professional. Story 6. There was one time a couple years ago when I was telling my dad about how our car was the only one that wasn't damaged or scratched, which was interesting considering it was the oldest car we had. Surely enough, the next day I went on my usual route to school and was at a stoplight when I heard the deafening sound of someone slamming their brakes. At the time I thought, oh man, is someone about to get hit, just before I felt my car jolt forward. Luckily it was just a fender bender and me and my brothers came out fine, but it was interesting how it happened that day. Story 7. My stalker telling me on our first and only date that he used to treat women like 4 years later. He still calls my work now and then to hurl obscenities at me. Story 8. I had 2 friends in college and we all had the same double major. One of them had broken his femur a year or 2 before, and I was on crutches for a broken ankle at the time. We had a conversation like this: friend 2, you two have a lot in common. You're both short and studying X and have broken your legs. Me, I mean all 3 of us have the same double major. Friend 2, well okay, I guess I'm in the group too, but I don't want to have the injury in common with you guys. A week later, he broke both of his feet. Story 9. I have the mouth of a sailor and I run it constantly. I had a teacher who I had gotten comfortable with over the course of high school, and I ended up feeling comfortable to swear around him. He told me once that my mouth was going to get me in trouble later in a professional setting if I didn't learn how to tone it down. Fast forward a couple of years and I was fired from my job for dropping an F-bomb in front of the company CFO. Story 10. One of the few solid memories I have of my biological father is him sitting me down and walking me through his absolute favorite song, not just pointing it out on the radio, making me, a small child, really understand the lyrics and the story behind them. He left when I was 6 to go to the gym, ran off with a nanny, and I haven't seen him in 25 years. The song, Cats in the Cradle. Don't let anyone fool you. The worst kind of deadbeat dad is the stereotypical kind. Story 11. I was taking care of my girlfriend while she had a really bad fever. The flu spread through her family and somehow made its rounds through my family, but luckily I didn't get sick. She commented that it was unfair that I never get sick. I thought back to when I last had to use a sick day at work and couldn't remember. I guess I was just pretty healthy or lucky. Later that week I was taking a shower when I noticed one of my testicles was a lot firmer and a bit bigger than the other. I did some quick research and came to the conclusion it was cancer. After many appointments and a surgery, sure enough, it was cancer. I got the cancer-free prognosis back in March, but it'll be under close monitoring for the next several years in case it makes a comeback. I appreciate everybody's well wishes. They seriously bring a smile to my face, and for all the men out there, Please tell your brothers, your sons, your dads, your friends, I never thought it could happen to me, but here I am one nutting it, but totally healthy because I just happened to catch it early. Story 12. One of my earliest memories when I was a kid was when I was playing my dad's electric organ in the basement. There was an airplane bottle of tequila on top of it, the kind with the worm. The sunlight came in through the window and lit up the bottle. I was fascinated by it. I would pick it up and hold it. Today I am a recovering alcoholic. It makes a lot of sense when I recall a number of instances like these. Story 13. My grandpa drove me home one day, but couldn't remember where to go. It seemed like he was looking for the house we lived in a few years ago before we moved, which was unusual since Hughes came to our new house many times. He ended up being diagnosed with Alzheimer's soon after that incident when he crashed his car into a light pole. Story 14. Woke up on a very humid morning with thunderstorms in the forecast. Our dog was laying in the hallway in front of the bathroom. We opened the bathroom door before heading to work and told the dog, if it gets too loud, just hide in here. Later that day a tornado hit our house. We lost our roof and most of our windows. Our dog survived with no injuries. Nobody else was home at the time. We were out signing a lease on a new rental house. A second bit of foreshadowing. I got home first and he was acting super guilty, like he thought we were going to blame him for the damage. We kept saying it's okay in a friendly sing-songy voice, but he didn't believe us. Story 15. I'm not sure that this is foreshadowing, so much as a sort of crazy film-like metaphor. This last winter, I 25 female spiraled into bulimia. It was my deep, dark secret. It began out of nowhere. I had never once had the impulse to make myself vomit before, but I think one day I realized vaguely that I could, and I got addicted. At first, it was once a week, then two, then every other day. It got to the point where I could spend 100 on food in one day, and all of it would be purged. It got serious. One night, there toward the end, I was purging and suddenly blood shot out of my nose, all the pressure in my head and whatnot from vomiting over and over. It was terrifying. Just a really scary period of my life. One night, I couldn't sleep, too much caffeine, stress from the whole mess. My body was wrecked. I got up at 5 a.m. and went for a long drive down a country road. It was rainy and cold. I was weak and shaky, and in a sort of fog, and all I could think about was how deep I was in this awful secret. This thing I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. There were all these cornfields on either side of me, and I saw something tangled in the barbed wire fence, got closer, and it was a doe. She was tangled bad. Like she had tried to hop over, gotten caught, flailed and got her back leg stuck, so she was suspended in the air by sharp metal wire across her stomach. She was cut up all over. I pulled over and was super freaked over it. She was breathing really heavily and whining, crying. And I wanted to help but was afraid because any time I got close she'd flail around and get even more contorted, and to be honest, my muscles couldn't do much if they tried, so I asked for help. Knocked on a farmer's door. Poor guy. It was 6 a.m. on a Saturday and he came and helped me. He just went for it, marched right up and grabbed her and twisted her out of the wiring. He had experience with that sort of thing. You could tell he got her out. She bounded away into the trees, and we all went our separate ways. I got back in my car and cried. It just was really supposed to be me that day, I think, that found the doe. I couldn't tell you why exactly. It just was. I drove home and decided it was time to talk to people about the eating disorder. Best decision I've ever made. I could have killed myself if I had kept trying to do it alone. Asking for help is a skill I have since been cultivating with great care. Story 16. Not sure if this detail counts as foreshadowing, but my stepmom was terrified of sharks. One day she started acting confused. I specifically remember her asking what day of the week. It was like 3 times in the same day. She was a nurse, worked nights a lot, so I figured she was just insanely underslept, or was on drugs. This lasted a few days. During spring break she goes up to a cabin with some friends, my dad, my brother and the dogs. I didn't go, said I didn't want to miss any swim practices. Really I wanted time away from her. It wasn't her bout of loopiness, we just didn't get along. The next morning her and my dad were out in the living room. I asked why they were back so soon. Apparently she woke up in the middle of the night and thought she'd fallen asleep in a hospital bed while on a shift and was insisting my dad and the dogs had to leave. They were going to the hospital to get her an MRI. My dad was being a dad and acting like everything might go back to normal. He almost convinced me she was too. She'd always been emotional, but I'd never seen her scared before. She worked in a mental hospital when her and my dad first started dating. She knew how people put family members in there because they were too much to handle. She used to have nightmares that she'd get locked in there by mistake. I wonder if she thought about that. Worried OT was where she'd end up. She didn't. They go to the hospital. My dad calls me while I'm working. Whatever scan they did detected this mass spread through her brain like cobwebs, but the docs had her fly to another island to tell what the mass was. They flew there that evening. The next day my dad calls. It's cancer and it's really bad. They're doing some surgery to see what they can do. He wants my brother and I to fly over. We do. When we get there her head's got more sticks than hair. She can barely talk or move. We're not sure if she even knows what's going on around her. Her condition got worse over the next 2 days. Eventually we decide it's best to bring her home and put her in hospice. In less than a month she dies. She's cremated. Her urn collects dust for a few months, then we go out on a boat to scatter it. It's a perfect day. Everybody jumps in to snorkel. That's the first time I saw a shark. Whoa. Thanks for all the kind words and support and for popping my gold cherry. This blew up while I was asleep. Story 17. Not one of mine, but it's related to me. The day before I was born, my uncle said he'd had a dream that I was born a blue baby like a smurf. He and my aunt were woken that night from a knock on the door from my dad who said my mum had gone into labor. When I eventually was born, ID had the cord wrapped around my neck and was completely blue. I had to be rushed to be resuscitated. Baby blue smuff. Story 18 saw my dad get hit by a sprinkler while in the car, so I, a seat behind him in the open window, laughed in the most mocking way possible before promptly getting cut off by the next splash of water, which must have been angled slightly differently. Dunno if that counts as foreshadowing, but it's definitely something I'd see coming if it were in a TV show. Story 19 I pretty much struggled to make friends until 6th grade. Finally making friends and feeling a sense of belonging was the greatest thing ever. 7th grade was then during the beginning of 8th grade something weird happened. All of my friends had classes together except me. We shared the same lunch, but I remember feeling incredibly left out because they were always talking about things I wasn't there for. They had inside jokes I didn't understand. I was alone again. I later learned my family was moving out of state. Within a month, we moved and I was literally back to nothing. I always saw that brief 8th grade year as a sort of foreshadowing of the storms to come. Edit, thank you guys for the kind words. This was back in like 2007 to 8. My family ended up moving twice during my 9th grade year and then once more my senior year. Since I was a new student as a senior, I wasn't even in the yearbook and didn't have my senior portraits done, but by that point I didn't really care anymore. Story 20 this year I was driving to an off-site job when, out of nowhere, I had the random thought of I should call my old bass professor from college. I didn't have the time to because of the nature of the gig, but it was nagging feeling all day. When I got back on site for a concert later that night, I got the email that he died. Right around the time I had the thought, literally stopped me in my tracks. I dropped my phone because I just broke in the moment. It wouldn't have made a difference. He was too far gone at that point. I still haven't come to terms with it though. That man made me who I am. Edit I appreciate all the positive responses and stories of similar people in people's lives. I can't reply to everyone, but the most important thing I've realized in my reflections over him was how lucky I was that I had him in my life and that he took a chance letting me into school. Teachers like that are once in a lifetime, and I hope everyone has someone like that in theirs. I could never repay him for that. I helped him a lot with medical stuff, but I just wish I could have done more at the end. Anyways, I'm just going to leave the post on Facebook I made about him. His name was Sam Cross. He taught at JMU in Virginia for over 40 years. Sam Cross died today. Most of the people on here have no idea who that is. That's okay, I can tell you about him. He was a teacher, he was my teacher, probably the best I ever knew. He's why I am where I am today. Without him, I would have gotten accepted in JMU's music school. Without him, I would have discovered my love for recording. Without him, I would have met my girlfriend. Without him, I would have adopted my dog, because he saw something in me in my audition. An audition I no business passing. He accepted me into the school in which I learned so much and met some of my closest friends, including him. I don't think I've ever met someone that really cared like Sam did. He just had this gift of putting you at ease that I really can't describe, but everyone knows it who have met him. Something about how he just disarmed you by being this crazy old guy and allowed you to relax enough to learn. I'm sitting here trying to write this while I hear fireworks going, and it just seems like the kind of joke Sam would have found funny. It just sucks because it's not funny to me. I keep expecting him to call and say interrupt to die. You made an old man go to all this trouble. I'm sorry you had to get up, Sam. I don't know what else to say right now aside from leaving the exchange that Sam had every student do when starting lessons. Sam, call me in, student. Mr. Cross, I can't do that. Sam, yes you can now, call me in, student. Fine, you're in, Sam, good, now we can be friends. And he was one of the best friends I ever had. Rest in peace, Sam, thank you for everything. Story 21 I used to love watching TV. When my dad got sick with cancer, I would watch it to distract myself. In the week leading up to his death, I kept seeing this PSA about how this girl older than me, but around my age, had watched her father also battle cancer illness, how he was getting worse, eventually checking into the hospital, where the girl learned to accept and move on past his death and illness, as the father had died at the end of the commercial. I'm not talking about how this PSA only played on one channel. It was on every channel I would stop on. Sure enough, at the end of the week, my father signed on with hospice, and died, while I took him dying hard. I think it definitely helped lessen the blow. Story 22 My cousin was an intensive care nurse. When I was 15 I was talking to her about her job and she told me she was currently looking after a patient who had been burnt. I remember saying to her that it would be horrible to go through something like that. A week later my family home burns down and I get pretty badly burned. Jinx myself, when I was 16 I went back to my best friend's house after going to make out with my girlfriend for an hour. It was around 5:30 a.m. I went up to his room and he wasn't there. Went down to their garage because I knew he was fighting with his girlfriend and he would often take aggression out on a punching bag down there. I found him hanging. It was too late. I'm 36 now and I never go more than a day without texting or calling all my friends just to make sure they're okay. I also volunteered for suicide prevention since exactly 1 year after the morning I saw that. Story 23 Back when I was about to start high school, the whole family got together at my grandmother's house for an impromptu get-together. As I left with my mother I asked, "Is Grandma going to be alone tonight?" My mother confirmed my guess. When asked why I said I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way. That night my grandmother had a massive stroke, and wasn't found until 2.5 days later. She lived, but she wasn't the same. My parents and I ended up taking care of her for the last year of her life. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I called up there once we got home. Story 24. My grandfather went off to Japan when he was 20. My father grew up in America and worked in animation. My mother was born in America, grew up in Japan, then worked in animation where she met my father. I then was born in America, got into animation, and left for Japan when I turned 20. I'm not sure if that's foreshadowing, but it's certainly synchronicity. Story 25. My mum and dad had been married since she was 21. They had tried for a child for 15 years with no luck, and my mum was told she was infertile. They were in Malaysia for her birthday and she got a palm reading from this old lady. She said, "You'll have a girl, followed by a boy, you'll have a health scare and die at a ripe age." At 40, my mum had me female. My brother was born 3 years later. My mum had a tumor removed from her ear canal, making her deaf in that ear. She is now 66. Story 26. Driving my friend's car with him in the passenger seat. I didn't have my license and he was letting me practice in his car before the test. A police car pulls behind us and I got all nervous, because what sane person doesn't get nervous with the police directly behind them? My friend is teasing me for being nervous and says, "It's not like he's going to pull you over." As soon as the last word is out of his mouth, the cop puts his lights on and pulls us over. It wasn't my driving, my friend forgot to renew his tags, so they were expired. Edit: I had my temporary license, and I was over 18 at the time, so I was legally able to drive with him as a passenger. Story 27. In 10th grade there was this slightly overbearing classmate who was just absolutely shocked to find out that I'd never kissed anyone yet, just totally confused by it. They asked, "What, are you gonna marry the first guy you kiss?" Right now I'm in my mid-20s and have only ever dated one person. Current so and I have been together 5 years. I'm not anywhere close to seriously considering marriage yet, but every once in a while I wonder in passing whether the correct answer to that old annoying kids question might weirdly turn out to just be yes. Story 28. Not my story, but it needs to be told. One of my teachers told me this. When she was still in college, she took health. The first thing they did in the class was watch a video on what to do if you were in a car accident and the car caught on fire. The video had a mom, dad, teenager, and a little kid in the car. My teacher doesn't know the rest of the video because the girl sitting next to her started having a seizure. 2 guys from the back grabbed the girl and carried her downstairs while my teacher grabbed the girl's belongings. They drove the girl to the emergency room and were told she might not make it. She made it and everything was fine, but a few months later that girl was driving with her mom, dad, and little brother when they were in a car accident and the car caught on fire. None of them made it. My teacher told us that this was a product of fate. Also, she told us this story to give us a reason to learn our classmates' names. She didn't know the girl's name, but one of the guys that carried her was Archie Manning. Story 29. Me repeatedly saying I hate physics every class since I was 16 might have hinted that the first year of my physics degree wasn't going to go too well. Story 30. This happened sometime in 2005-ish on New Year's Day, when my great-aunt was very frail from some kind of disease. It was a typical family reunion type of celebration, and we were taking family pictures and all. Hey race, the weird thing, all the photos taken from a phone camera show my great-aunt missing some body parts. Like no torso or body and all, disembodied arms. No other person in the picture looked like this. It could easily have been a glitch, but it was a popular Filipino superstition that pictures like this mean doom for the victim. Weeks later, my great-aunt passed away. Creepiest foreshadowing Eve ever witnessed. Edit: Look, I'm not forcing y'all to believe, but I know what I saw. I'm not saying it's pure paranormal, and, again, it could be just a glitch or a light trick, or a case of cultural superstition mentality, but it's a scary foreshadowing nonetheless. Edit 2. I don't have the pictures, as it was from a very old phone from a long time ago, but I assure you this superstition paranormal phenomenon is real. Check this video out. The language is Filipino but the images speak for themselves. Story 31. Got a new boss at work. I remember sitting with my coworkers when one of them said this is the beginning of the end for us if we don't organize. Sure enough, this year we all went out for drinks together after our last official day as colleagues. Some were forced out, many left voluntarily due to stress. Story 32. One of my first girlfriends when I was 14 was fairly morbid and depressed. We had a passionate relationship but I ended things badly when I didn't know how to handle her emotional needs at that age. One of the things that I always associated with her from then on was the Amy Sedaris show Strangers with Candy. It was one of her favorite shows and we used to watch it together. I avoided the show for years because of the guilt associated with the way ID handled the relationship. 6 years later, when I was in college, Strangers with Candy popped up on Netflix. I rewatched the whole series, and because of all of my nostalgic associations, I got the feeling that it might finally be time, what with Facebook and all, to reach out to her, apologize for my immature breakup of years before, and try to be friends. But that very month, after not hearing a word about her for all those years, I got a call from our old mutual friend that she had committed suicide. Story 33. When I was about 5, I had a reoccurring dream where I thought I was awake, and my dad came into my room in his whitey-tighties. I was always confused about it, and reached out to hug him but my hands just went through him because he wasn't really there. When I turned 11, he was really there, but I was too afraid to open my eyes. He has about 18 years left on his sentence now. Story 34. There was this girl I knew in middle school. We hated each other's guts. And I mean it. One time she slapped me in the face, we fought for a little while, and we both got detention. Another time, I remember her pantsing me in front of all my friends, so the next day I did the same to her, we got into another fight, and got more detention. We really hated each other. I'd call her a, and etc., and she'd call me a douchebag and etc., would always fight and always get into detention. To basically the first 5 years I knew her. Guess who I ended up marrying? Take your wildest guess. When you put that much effort into hating someone, it's for a reason. P.S. I know you'll read this eventually. Love you, Jessica. I'm writing this from a hospital waiting room. My wife is in labor. Our second baby is on the was as we speak. Story 35. The hundreds of times I joked about strengthening my immune system while eating something off the floor or something else gross or unsanitary. I have an autoimmune disease now. It just got too powerful. Story 36. When I had my first boyfriend at 14, I was miserable and kept thinking of how I'd rather be spending time with my female best friend than him, and how we'd have so much fun if we went on dates together instead. Surprise, surprise, I turned out to be gay. Looking back, I don't know how I didn't realize sooner. Story 37. My poor language development and poor motor control were big foreshadowing of my dyslexia. She's a smart girl, she just needs to pay more attention. She's a smart girl, but she needs to check her work. Her handwriting needs more focus. She's not practicing enough. Mother, dyslexia. Story 38. Trying heroin and thinking to myself, I'll never for heroin or go to prison or get help, see, or ruin my life. Luckily I turned it around eventually after all that. Story 39. I think my story counts. Kept feeling like I was blacking out, but thought nothing of it. When I was a kid, whenever I was at middle school dances, I'd stop what I was doing and black out a few seconds, or riding my bike on one occasion and a matter of seconds later wake up on the ground. And then when I was 13 I had my first grand mal tonic-clonic seizure and was diagnosed with epilepsy. My doctors figured I'd been having absence seizures as a kid a whole lot, but since they're very small and not noticeable it went, well, unnoticed. Story 40. A few months before I went to Afghanistan I got a tattoo of a guardian angel. The tattoo cuts off right around the middle of her legs. I ended up getting both my legs blown off. When I realized the irony of the tattoo, I got prosthetic legs added onto her with the Sanjan Valley in the background. They'll provide pictures if you guys are interested. Edit. What it was before 2011, what it looks like now. I tried to take the best pictures I could. Sorry they're not great. My prosthetics for comparison. Edit 2. Thank you all for your kind words. You're all awesome people and I love ya. Story 41. When I was 7, I was lying on the floor petting my family's dachshund and told him, I don't know what I'd do without you. He died 2 days later of a heart attack. He was 13 and lived a great life. But it was the first death I ever dealt with and I took it hard. He was my first best friend. Story 42. My wife, a beautiful British redhead, was annoyed as a girl by the fact that she had freckles. Her mother used to tell her that Americans loved freckles, and she'd wind up marrying a rich American someday. She was half right. Story 43. When I was around 10 to 12 years I was visiting my aunt and met a friend of hers that was a psychic. She asked me if I wanted to know about my future in love or job, and I chose job. She told me that I was going to one day try to get back into something that I had previously quit and that I will have the support of a blonde woman and be very successful. Not your mother. Yes, she is blonde too, but someone powerful. I went to college for a degree in medical assisting and never landed a job in the field, only to wind up kinda stuck in retail for almost 10 years after giving up since I was constantly told that the 100 hours I spent working as an intern didn't count as experience. Earlier this year I landed a job at a vision center thanks to my mother-in-law's recommendation and help reviewing and editing my resume. My blonde mother-in-law that has insane connections with many powerful people, including being friends with my company's CEO. While it was me that interviewed and built my resume, I can't help but think that I would have been overlooked if it wasn't for having her as a recommendation and being able to directly email my resume to the person that is now my boss. After about a month of my new job, I randomly remembered those words spoken to me as a child. Story 44. One time, when I was a kid eating at a diner with my mom, an older man came up to us. He asked me if I was a singer. I was like 910 years old. I said yes. And my mom was cautious to keep talking to this man. He went on to say, one day, you're going to sing for millions of people. Your voice is going to touch people and heal people all over the world. I was pretty creeped out. My mom thought he was some kind of prophet. Fast forward 16 years, and I was on American Idol this year. I got loads of screen time and people really came to love my voice. My original music has been listened to by people all over the world and I get messages occasionally from people about how certain songs really touch them and how they've been through something similar. It was a crazy ride, and I thought back to that man on more than one occasion. Story 45. When I was a kid, I would always poke fun at my uncle for carrying his gun with him when we would go camping. I was young, naive, and we lived in southern Arizona. It wasn't like there were any bears out here. He always said you never know. Well, flash forward to last year, I was desert camping with a good friend of mine and his GF. They went to their camp and I stayed out to see the stars. I loved stargazing out in the wilderness. You can see the whole Milky Way and everything, but out of nowhere I hear a snarl. A coyote had come out and stumbled into our camp. He was wild-eyed, foaming and twitching. My friend heard it too and came out of his tent. I always carried my trusty old K-bar with me, so I drew that out as they got closer and closer. He leapt for my throat. I fell backwards, tripping over a rock as I raised my hands. He bit my right hand as I stabbed it with my left. I must have pierced its heart or something, cause it almost just deflated, flopping down and twitching. I was rushed to the hospital where they gave me rabies shots, and I came in for the next few weeks to get more just in case. And no, they didn't stick needles in my. Now I always carry a SW500 with me when I go camping or trekking, just in case. Story 46. As a teenager, I judged my mom for giving up a career to stay home with her kids and being financially dependent on my dad. I remember thinking, how could she do that? He'll never do that. Oh, how the turntables. Story 47. I've told this story before when someone asked about a time we were sure we were going to die. I flew from Florida to Michigan in January to house dog sit so my mom could go to Florida for a week. I stayed at my brother's for a night and had begun the first draft for what turned into the third book in a series. In the prologue, I had a character spin out on black ice. My 8-year-old nephew and I spoke about driving in snow later that day. He asked if it was scary. I said no, of course not. Your dad taught me how to drive in the snow. I'm good, little man. The next day I drove to mom's hometown. On my way back to my brother's the day before I was due to fly out, we had some weird snow. I hit black ice as I was changing lanes on the highway doing about 55 miles per hour. I flipped the SUV 412 times. I walked away from it. My pooch did not. R.I.P. Bailey. The bestest boy. Word of advice: do not let your beloved pets roam the vehicle freely. Use an approved crate or carrier. The feeling you carry in your gut when your best boy dies because you're stupid is not something you want to carry with you. TLDR wrote a car accident into a book. Basically bragged to a kid that I could drive in snow. Almost died driving in snow a week later.